So where does empathy come from, and why is it that some people seem to be highly empathic and other people seem to have a far more limited capacity for empathy? Well, empathy and being able to feel for another person and relate to what another person is feeling has a lot to do with how our own emotions are attended to. If our emotions are neglected, dismissed, suppressed, then we really don't have a very good capacity to attend to other people's emotions, because we're going to treat other people's emotions exactly how we treat our own emotions. If we're not comfortable with our own emotions, we have a habit of suppressing them, then we would assume that other people should do the same. And that's a very automatic process. That's not necessarily a conscious thing that someone thinks about, but when they see someone else experiencing an emotion, they would just assume that this should be dealt with in the way that they deal with their emotions, or they don't know how to attend to this other individual's emotions because they haven't learned how to attend to their own emotions. So how does this work in terms of someone's upbringing and in someone's life? Like, is it a case that someone is born highly empathic and then they are that way for life? Can empathy be developed and built on? Of course it can. So from day one, if someone is being brought up in an environment where when they cry or when they experience a negative emotion, they, on a consistent basis, they regularly receive very good care for those emotions. Their emotional needs are attended to by caregivers. They're given messages that when you experience distress, we'll be there for you, we'll help you through it, and you can, if you express it, you can get to the other side of this and everything will be okay. So that might be one person's experience. However, far too many people have the experience of growing up in households where actually their parents don't have a good capacity for empathy and they don't have a good capacity for attending to their child's emotions. And therefore, what happens is a child experiences distress and then this is ignored. And that child learns very quickly from a very young age, okay, negative emotions are not to be expressed. I will either be punished if I express them or I'll be ignored. It's actually going to cause me more pain to express them. Therefore, I'll just try and deal with that myself. I'll try and suppress those emotions. I'll just keep it within and I don't need to tell anyone about it. That's my own problem and I need to just try to push those to one side and be happy. So children often learn from a really young age to suppress emotions if their emotional needs are not met. Now, that upbringing paves the way for someone to not necessarily be highly empathic. But do they have to stay that way for life? Absolutely not. The individuals who actually later in life, if that is their upbringing and they have the habit of suppressing emotions because that's what they've been taught to do, that's their learned behavior, those individuals might go on and start addressing their emotions later in life. They might, at some point in their life, actually decide that this is not a healthy way of being, that they've experienced lots of difficulties in their life and they now want to confront these difficulties, and that individual might do a number of things. They might go to therapy to actually start to learn how to feel their emotions, address their emotions, release their emotions. They might start confiding in friends. They might start actually being able to communicate about their emotions, and they might learn how to actually sit through very difficult emotions. It doesn't have to be the case that they absolutely go to therapy. There's other ways that people can develop really good emotional literacy. But it's often the case that people who grow up in households where emotions are not attended to, these people are not even good at labeling emotions. Like if you ask someone who grows up in a household where there's childhood emotional neglect, what do they feel? They'll usually tell you the thought that they're having, I don't feel great about the situation, but that's not a feeling. Feelings are like anxiety, depression, jealousy, excitement, happiness. So even the emotional literacy of someone who grows up with childhood emotional neglect is going to be quite low. But this can all be changed through psychoeducation, reading about healthier ways of dealing with emotions and practicing those ways. You definitely have to confide in others and you have to trust others with your emotions, whether that be a therapist or whether that be some close loved ones, you definitely need other people to help you develop higher levels of empathy. Even if it's just one person, even if it's just a one-to-one therapeutic relationship, if you can sit and cry with another person, it really helps release a lot of stored up emotions, as well as dealing with things like shame that you held about feeling these negative emotions in the first place, because that can be another problem, that people can feel very shameful about having negative emotions, and they can feel that actually being vulnerable is not a good thing. Being able to be vulnerable and release these negative emotions is something that they might perceive as this makes them weak, rather than actually to release your negative emotions helps strengthen you as a person and helps you be strong and helps you access the more positive emotions as well. In fact, actually, if you don't work through your negative emotions, you can't feel as happy as someone who feels all of their emotions to the max. So people, in order to enhance their empathy, they need to learn to deal with life's difficulties. An example of this might be if someone is going through a breakup, that might be tremendously difficult for them. But if they're not in the habit of working through their difficulties, working through their negative emotions, they're just going to say to themselves, okay, it's tough, but I just need to move on with it. And they suppress their emotions. They don't ever grieve that breakup properly. They don't ever really let themselves have the room to cry as much as they need to and feel as much pain as they need to. And that person, first of all, they don't move on from the breakup as easily, as quickly, and that will often cause problems in future relationships where they might have anxieties or fears that the same kind of problems are going to happen again, and they will have this kind of instinct kick in, a bit of a natural fight or flight instinct, where they might experience a lot of anxiety in future relationships because they haven't worked through a breakup properly. But then you have the individual who has a breakup, and or whatever traumatic experience they have in their life. It could be anything that causes a huge amount of distress, and they really give themselves time to heal and feel, and they work through it in a healthy way. And that is an individual who is also going to be able to recognize pain and distress in another individual, psychological distress in another individual, because they know what it's like to feel emotional distress. They know that they need their emotional distress recognized by other people. They know that it's helpful when someone is kind to them when they're experiencing emotional distress. They know that it's a painful thing to feel, but that it's going to be okay. And even the ability that someone has to see emotional distress in another person is really heightened and enhanced when someone has learned to work through their own psychological difficulties. And I can relate to this myself. When I was much younger, I really wasn't very emotionally literate at all. I originally was not so good at naming my emotions, and was certainly not very good at letting myself feel them. And therefore, I wasn't really that empathic towards other people. Like, if other people would cry in front of me, I just wouldn't really say anything or feel anything. And it really shocks me that I used to be this way, because that's not me at all as a person now. That if I even see a tiny bit of distress in someone, I recognize that they're in psychological discomfort straight away, and I'm able to attend and respond to that. But there was definitely a point in my life where I was very good at suppressing my emotions, and I really didn't know how to deal with my emotions in any other way. And therefore, I didn't really understand when someone else was in pain. Like, I could see they were in pain, I could see they were upset, but I didn't really know what was the most helpful thing to do in this situation. Or I would kind of want them to just dry their tears and be okay, because that's what I would do when I'm in distress. I was very good at hiding it and suppressing it and not feeling. And I certainly would never have cried in front of other people. That was like something that I would never have done. And it took a lot of work to be able to break this pattern. It really took a lot of going inward and learning how to feel, and working through traumas, learning how to feel pain, emotional pain, crying all of that out and letting myself, feel the distress in order to feel better. And so really, the way to enhance your empathy is to look at your emotional well-being, look at what you feel, how you feel it, and how you sit through emotions. And this might all be very confusing for someone who's not actually very good at working through difficult emotions, but there's room to go on a whole journey with this. You can try a lot of different things, and usually it's good to try to do the exact opposite thing to what you would normally do when you're in emotional distress or pain, in order to learn a different way of being. So if you know that you're someone who likes to deal with your emotions in private, by yourself, without trusting in anyone else, then probably trying to do the exact opposite thing, or testing out what happens, you know, if you share some of your emotional world with another person, can be very interesting. And there's no fixed way in order to learn how to deal with emotions better, apart from just having that intention of, okay, I want to start feeling my emotions to their entirety. Remember, it does come with the benefits of knowing that you will enhance your empathy, and also you'll be able to access the positive emotions like happiness much more if you work through your pain and difficulties. But just having that intention that you want to do it will mean that you're open to different things that you can try, such as calling a friend and actually crying over the phone with them present. And for them, you know, you have to pick your friends carefully here, because you don't want to pick the friend who's just trying to fix it. You want to pick the friend who's able to sit with you in those moments of difficulty, and be fairly silent, but like says the right prompts of like, it's okay, you know, I'm here for you, these kind of things, rather than trying to make you stop crying, because that's a person who's probably good at sympathy but not so good at empathy. And you know, you can really go on a whole journey with this, you know, have a brainstorm of ideas as to how you can start to practice feeling your emotions more, in order to, of course, enhance your empathy. But it, you know, it doesn't matter what your goal is here. It doesn't matter if your goal is, I want to learn how to feel my emotions more in order to enhance my empathy, or I want to learn how to feel my emotions more because I know it's going to allow me to be happier in the future, or that it's going to allow you to get over things in a way that's much healthier. Like the person who experiences a bereavement, who never cries, they're the people who are going to experience depression. Like a year down the line, they're not going to be over that bereavement. They're still going to be in pain in some way from it. And as I mentioned earlier, the person who goes through the breakup and doesn't work through that emotionally is going to carry that into future relationships. And any trauma, you know, sometimes we experience major traumas, you know, really horrific things can happen us in life, which can be worked through if someone does develop post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a really difficult thing to experience, but people can get to the other side of it and be absolutely fine, and develop it's a topic I'm really fond of, which is post-traumatic growth, which is basically where someone has something very traumatic happen to them, but they grow further than they ever would have before because of what they've experienced. So there's so many reasons, like I cannot sell it to you more as to why you should try to feel your emotions more if you're that kind of person who tends to suppress emotions. Like there's so many benefits, but you will just deal with life better, you'll deal with people better, you will navigate situations better, you'll know what to do when times are tough, because we suffer as people, like we really, really suffer as humans. It's one of the things about being human, that if you are human, you will suffer in life. And a lot of people don't understand that that's everyone, like particularly if someone is deep in their suffering and in that why me and feeling really alone in it. It's easy for people to forget that actually all humans suffer. Of course, some people suffer more, but we all suffer in some shape or form. And for that reason, we can all find benefit in learning how to work through our suffering and how to work through our emotional distress in a way that's most healthy for us, so that we can release it and live as the most wholehearted humans that we possibly can be.